This is the first frame of your prison story. The Bentley's engine was still running when Gareth Ellison crossed the puddled concrete to hook up the tow cable. Steam curling from the luxury sedan's hood into the cold February morning and the driver's door hanging open like a damaged wing. He'd run the underground parking beneath the Riverside County Courthouse for 8 years and had never seen anyone abandon a $100,000 car at the exit gate. "Sir," Gareth called, his voice bouncing off the concrete. "You can't leave your vehicle here." No answer. The Bentley's hazard lights flashed under the harsh fluorescent tubes, throwing jittering shadows across the oil-stained floor. Gareth checked his watch. 7:42 a.m. The courthouse would open in 18 minutes and the Monday crush was about to begin. He circled the car, noting temporary dealer plates and a leather briefcase visible through the passenger window. A registration hung from the rear view that read, Cullen Dri. The name meant nothing to him, but the car was blocking the only exit from the lower level and 23 vehicles sat trapped behind it. He radioed dispatch, "This is Ellison at Riverside. I need a tow truck for an abandoned vehicle, a Bentley blocking the exit ramp." "Copy that, Gareth. ETA 15 minutes. By the time the tow arrived, a queue of annoyed commuters had gathered by the elevator bank. Gareth marshaled traffic while the driver winched the Bentley onto the flatbed and began the paperwork. At that moment, a sharply dressed man strode out of the courthouse entrance, moving fast. "Where's my car?" he demanded. His tone carried the kind of authority that comes from never being told no. He was tall, mid-30s, and walked like someone used to being obeyed. "You Cullen Dri?" Gareth asked without looking up from his clipboard. "Yeah, and you just towed my car. I want it back." Gareth kept his voice even. The vehicle was abandoned in a no-parking zone, blocking emergency egress. The tow fee is $200 plus storage. Cullen stepped closer. Gareth could smell the cologne. "Listen, buddy, I'm not some deadbeat who can't pay. I had a meeting upstairs that ran long. I'll pay your fee, but I want my car back now. Tow company policy is 48 hours minimum storage. You can call them." Gareth handed him a card. "Daniels Towing. They're on Maple Street." Cullen's face tightened with indignation. "You know what I do for a living? I develop commercial real estate. I make more in a month than you probably see in a year." Gareth studied him, and something familiar in the jawline and the eyes clicked into place. "Good for you," Gareth said. Cullen's voice rose. "You think this is funny? I could buy this whole garage. I could have you fired with one phone call." "Maybe, but your car's still getting towed." Gareth turned to walk away. "Wait." Cullen grabbed his arm. "What's your name?" "Gareth Ellison." Cullen's grip tightened, then released, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. "Ellison, huh? Small world. You know me. I know of you." Cullen's smile was thin and cold. Later that evening, Gareth sat in his aging Toyota Camry across the street from the duplex his father had left him. Watching Cullen Dri let himself in with a key to the smaller unit. The house was a 1920s Craftsman converted into 2 units. Gareth in the larger left unit and retired Mrs. Patterson renting the smaller right unit for 3 years. Gareth watched as his wife Lena opened the door before Cullen could and slipped into an embrace with him on the stoop. She wore the red dress she'd bought for their anniversary but had never worn for him, and a chill settled in Gareth's gut. His phone buzzed, a text from Lena, "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." Gareth drove home, parked in his usual spot, and sat in the dark house with only the living room lamp on a timer as his coffee went cold while he tried to make sense of what he'd seen. The name Cullen Dri nagged at him, so he opened his laptop and scoured social media. Cullen's LinkedIn listed Meridian Development Group and showed corporate snapshots, one with a blonde woman in a cocktail dress draped in his arm. Gareth recognized that woman, Lena. He scrolled through months of photos from dinners, sites, and events where Lena appeared in the background. Timestamps reached back months. At 11:47 p.m. Gareth heard Lena's key in the lock and she came into the kitchen, shrugging off her coat. "You're up late," she said without meeting his eyes. "Couldn't sleep. How was work?" "The usual inventory discrepancies," he replied. She opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of wine and asked, "Want some?" "No thanks." "Who's Cullen Dri?" Lena's hand froze on the bottle. "Who?" "Cullen Dri. The guy I met today who said he knew me. He seemed familiar." She swallowed half the glass in one draft. "I'm tired. I'm going to bed." After he heard the bedroom door close, Gareth dove back into public records and property documents for his address. The house had been in his family for 43 years. His father bought it in 1981 and lived there until his death in 2019, leaving it to Gareth in his will. The deed was clear, but a document dated 6 weeks earlier showed a power of attorney file that gave Lena authority to act for Gareth in real estate matters. The signature looked like his, but he had never signed such a document. His hands shook as he uncovered a listing agreement filed with the county recorder showing the house for sale and the listing agent tied to Meridian Development Group. He printed everything. The next morning, Gareth called in sick for the first time in 2 years and drove to the recorder's office to pull complete copies. The clerk, a weary middle-aged woman, handed him a stack and remarked, "Quite a bit of activity on this property recently." As he read in the car, he found the notarization stamped Patricia Vance, Riverside's notary. But when he drove to the mailbox store to check the notary, she hadn't worked there in 6 months and had moved to Arizona. The clerk confirmed the stamp on the document was a forgery and advised him to call the police. He would. Gareth went to see his old friend Darian Lockcatch at the used car lot on the south side of town. Darian had been his college roommate and was street smart in ways Gareth wasn't. Darian whistled when he saw the papers. "This is sophisticated," he said. "Whoever did this knows real estate law." Darian suggested the police route but warned that proving forgery would take time, and in the meantime the house could be sold. "I know a lawyer," he said. "Sasha Vinter. Used to work for the DA. Tell her I sent you. She owes me a favor." Darian wrote a number and Gareth drove downtown to a converted warehouse where Sasha's office shared space with an art gallery and yoga studio. Sasha was younger than he expected, maybe 40, with short black hair and a direct gaze. Darian had told her about his property problem. She gestured for him to sit and listened as he explained everything. "How long have you been married?" she asked. 4 years. "Any kids?" "No, prenup." "No," Sasha leaned back and said California law generally protects inherited property as separate, which made the fraud more interesting. Lena couldn't sell what she didn't own. "First," she said, "we file a complaint with the county recorder to flag the property so no sale can close. Second, document every text, call, and interaction. Third, we set a trap. Make the people who did this panic and confess." Her smile was sharp. Her retainer was $5,000. Gareth wrote the check. That evening he sat at the kitchen table as Lena walked in looking tired but with a faint flicker of relief. "What was your day like?" he asked, folding his hands. "Fine, busy," she said, pouring wine. "How about yours?" "Feeling better?" he asked. "Much better," he lied, and then said he'd been thinking about them and suggested counseling. Lena paused, then slipped her arms around him and told him she loved him. They made love with an urgent intensity as if it might be their last night together. Later, while she slept, Gareth woke and asked quietly, "What would you do if something happened to me? If I died or we divorced? What would happen to this house?" She stroked his arm and admitted she hadn't thought about it. She might stay here, she said, and joked about selling only if someone offered a lot of money. Gareth said he wouldn't sell. The house was his father's legacy. The next morning while Lena showered, he checked her phone. She'd left it charging and he knew the passcode, and the messages spelled everything out. Colin texted, "Meeting with escrow company today. Should be ready to close by end of week." Lena replied, "What if he finds out?" "Colin, he won't. By the time he knows, it'll be done." Lena, "I feel terrible." "Colin, you said he's holding you back. This is your chance for a real life." Gareth screenshotted the exchange, sent it to his own phone, then erased the evidence from Lena's history. He lay back pretending to sleep until she dressed and kissed him goodbye, promising to make it up that weekend, and then called Sasha to accelerate the plan. The close was this week and they had to move fast. Gareth then visited his father-in-law Dennis in Palm Desert. The gated house, a quiet monument to suburban success, where Dennis opened the door with barely concealed disapproval of Gareth. "What brings you out here?" Dennis asked. "I wanted to talk about Lena." Gareth said simply, "I think she might be having an affair." The words hung like smoke. Dennis's face cycled through shock to defensive anger. "Do you have proof?" he demanded. Gareth showed photos, texts, and told him Colin had a key to the house. Dennis bristled and urged him to leave, saying perhaps he should talk to Lena first before things got ugly. "When this comes out, it will be public," Gareth said calmly. "Court records, social media, newspapers. Is that what you want?" Dennis hesitated, then said he'd try to speak to her. If he didn't, Gareth would handle it his way. Driving back at sunset, Gareth's phone rang. It was Sasha with news. She'd researched Colin DRI and found a pattern. 3 years earlier, Colin had been linked to a scheme where an elderly woman signed power of attorney to a nephew who then sold the house to a development company. The woman died before trial and Colin, who'd been questioned, escaped charges. "He's good at this," Sasha told him. "But you're not an elderly victim. You know how to fight. Tomorrow, start a conversation. Tell Lena you know about the power of attorney, but don't mention Colin. Make her panic. Gareth spent the next day installing hidden cameras around the house through a discreet security company Sasha recommended. When Lena came home with takeout at 7:30 p.m., he remained standing while she set the containers down and sat on a stool with chopsticks in hand. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" she asked. "About the power of attorney you filed." Color left her face. She put the chopsticks down and gripped the table. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "I've seen the documents, Lena. I know you're trying to sell the house." Lena sagged into the stool and stammered that she'd meant it to be a surprise, that she'd found a buyer at $2.1 million and wanted a fresh start, something that was theirs rather than his father's. Gareth's jaw went tight. "You forged my signature." Tears spilled as she tried to explain. She'd wanted to tell him before closing, she said, but everything was handled through a broker, so she didn't remember the company. Gareth pressed for cancellation. "Call them tomorrow and cancel the sale." She shook her head. She couldn't. When he demanded why, she confessed she'd already spent the earnest money, $50,000. Gareth stared in disbelief. "You stole $50,000 from me," he said. "It wasn't stealing. I was going to tell you," she sobbed. He stood and told her to leave. She sprang up, voice cracking. "This is my home too." "It's my home," he said flatly. "You're someone who lives here, and now you don't." Her tears cut off. She backed toward the door and cried that he couldn't throw her out because she was his wife. He met her without mercy. "Then act like it. Call the broker. Tomorrow. Call off the sale. Return the money. And never lie to me again." Her lower lip trembled. He paused for a breath, voice cold and decisive. "Then if you refuse, you'll discover what happens when you steal from someone who has nothing left to lose." That night Lena slept in the spare room. Through the thin partition, Gareth heard the muffled strings of her urgent pleas over the phone while he lay awake, haunted by the betrayal. At 3 in the morning his phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk tomorrow, 7 p.m., Riverside Park. Come alone." He snapped a screenshot and forwarded it to Sasha. Her reply was instant and sharp. "Don't go. This is escalating." But Gareth was already pulling on clothes. The park was empty at dusk, only a few shuffling figures on battered benches and the soft rise and fall of night air. He sat on a picnic table near the playground, eyes sweeping the pools of light and darkness. At 7:15 exactly, Colin emerged from the shadows by the restrooms and eased onto the bench across from him. "You came," Colin said as he settled. Gareth checked his watch. "You wanted to talk." Under the street lamps Colin looked older, a little worn compared to the man Gareth had faced at the garage. He rubbed his fingers through his hair. "Lena's upset," Colin offered. "She should be," Gareth replied, folding his arms. Colin leaned in. "She says you threatened her." "I told her to return the money she stole," Gareth said calmly. Colin gave a hollow laugh. "It's not that simple." "It is," Gareth insisted. "She cancels the sale, gives back the earnest money, and we pretend none of this happened." Colin's head shook. His eyes went dark. "You really don't get it, do you?" "Get what?" Gareth asked, tension pricking. "My wife doesn't love you," Colin said flat. "She never loved you. She married you out of pity while you cared for your dying father, thinking it was noble." Gareth's jaw tightened. "Is that what she told you?" "She told me a lot," Colin murmured. "How you had no ambition, how you were content managing a parking garage your whole life, how she felt trapped." Gareth worked to keep his face composed. "And you offered her a way out." Colin sat straighter. "I offered her a real life. We'll buy a house in Malibu, get married, have kids." Gareth's eyes narrowed. "With my money. With cash from a house you never deserved." Colin snapped back that Gareth had simply inherited it, not earned it. Gareth muttered that neither of them had earned it, in the way Colin claimed. Colin sprang up. "Here's how it's going to go. Lena completes the sale, you sign, and then you disappear." Gareth met Colin's stare. "Or else." Colin's smile curled. "Complications arise. Accidents occur. People get hurt." For the first time in days, Gareth allowed a small, tight smile. "Are you threatening me?" he asked. "I'm explaining reality," Colin said smoothly. "This is bigger than you imagine. Other people are involved. people who hate loose ends. Gareth's brow lifted. Like the old woman in Rancho Mirage. Colin's face flickered. "You've been busy," he said. "I know what you are," Gareth replied, rising. "I know what you do, and I know you'll try it again." "Prove it," Colin challenged. Calmly, Gareth took a tiny digital recorder from his jacket. "I already did." Colin lunged, but Gareth was ready. He rolled off the table and sprinted down the gravel path as Colin shouted behind him that it wasn't over. Gareth didn't glance back until he was in his car, hands shaking on the wheel as he drove home. The house was dark and Lena's car was gone. He rang Sasha as soon as he stepped inside. "I got him on tape," he said. Sasha's voice threaded worry through the line. "What did he say?" "Enough," Gareth managed. "He swallowed. He threatened me, admitted the fraud, mentioned Rancho Mirage." "Good," Sasha said, but she warned him his safety was at risk and urged he stay somewhere else that night. Gareth leaned against the hallway wall and, firm with resolve, murmured that this was his home and he wouldn't run. "Then call the police," she urged. "Not yet," he whispered. "I want to finish this first." He spent the night poring over footage from the covert cameras. Lena had made 17 calls between midnight and 6 a.m., and most of the audio was intelligible. The pattern that emerged was worse than he'd feared. Colin wasn't a lone con artist, but part of an organized ring specializing in real estate fraud, preying on vulnerable people. Recent widowers, elderly owners, divorcees, using forged documents, bribed officials, and seemingly legitimate shell companies. Lena had not simply been a dupe or a passive accomplice. She had become a recruiter. Her job at the shipping company had given her access to personnel records and family situations, and she'd been feeding Colin targets for months. Gareth realized he'd been their biggest score. The next morning he drove to the district attorney's office and filed a complaint. The prosecutor assigned was Patricia Huang, a white-collar specialist who flipped through his evidence with concern. "This is extensive," she said. "How long have you been collecting this?" 3 days, Gareth replied, fingers steepled. Patricia's eyebrows rose. 3 days? This looks like months of work. He met her gaze and answered simply, "I'm motivated." She tapped a pen and warned that building a case would take months, maybe years, and recovery of funds was uncertain. He shrugged. "I don't care about the money." Her pen paused. "What do you want then?" "Justice," he said. Still, even as he answered, he knew justice might not be enough. That evening he sat in a dark living room, watching the clock until soft footsteps creaked in the hallway and then Lena's cautious voice. "He's not here." Another voice replied, "You sure? His car is gone." "Good," Colin murmured. "Let's get this done." Gareth held his breath as they moved through the house, packing valuables. He heard the metallic click of his father's watch case being opened and the faint jangle of his mother's jewelry, the clatter of china leaving the dining room. Colin asked about the safe. Lena answered from the closet, "Know the combination?" Her voice was tight. "His father's birthday. Same one he uses for everything." A small smile crossed Gareth's face. He had changed that combination 3 days earlier. For an hour they carried boxes to the car. Gareth counted 3 trips down the driveway. When they returned their footsteps were hesitant. Lena announced shaking, "That's everything valuable." Colin exhaled in satisfaction and said they'd torched the place. Lena gasped. "What?" He shrugged, explaining they'd report fraud as arson and then collect an insurance payout on top of the sale. Lena protested sharply. "Colin, no. I can't. I won't." He stepped closer, voice low and coercive. "You don't have a choice. We're in too deep." "I never agreed to this," she insisted. "You agreed when you forged his signature," he countered. A slap cracked in the dark. Lena cried out, "Don't touch me." Colin's tone hardened. "You'll do as I say. We're partners, equal partners." She pleaded to get out. He chuckled. "Too late." At that instant Gareth flicked the living room lights on and stepped into view. "Hello, Lena," he called. They spun toward him, Colin clutching a gas can, Lena gripping a box of medals which slid and scattered across the carpet. "Gareth," Lena stammered, dropping the box as medals skittered. "I can explain," she mouthed. His face was composed. "I'm sure you can. You're very good at explaining." He looked to Colin. "In fraud, interesting twist." Colin set the gas can down. "How long have you been here?" Gareth asked. Long enough, Colin muttered. Gareth raised his phone. Smile for the camera. Lena's eyes widened as the metals flashed in the lens. Gareth, please, she begged. He ignored her. This video's been recording for the last hour. Everything's uploaded. Colin's face flushed. You son of a... Gareth stood tall and laid out the charges. Breaking and entering, theft, conspiracy to commit arson, insurance fraud. You're looking at 10 to 15 years, he said. Colin's jaw tightened. You think you're smart? Gareth stepped closer. I think I'm thorough. He spoke of Rancho Mirage, the shell companies, the other victims, and said Colin was headed to prison. Colin's hand darted into his jacket and produced a magnum. Colin, no, Lena screamed. He barked at her to be quiet and leveled the weapon at Gareth. You'll delete that video. Gareth's voice didn't waver. No, I'll end you, Colin snarled. Maybe, Gareth admitted, steady. But the video's in the cloud. Killing me won't change anything. Colin's hands trembled. You're bluffing, he said. Gareth smiled faintly. Am I? He held the phone screen high. Silence pressed the room. Colin's arm lowered and the gun slid down. This isn't over, he muttered. Gareth exhaled and dialed. Emergency. Minutes later, red and blue lights painted the house as officers moved in, securing Colin and placing cuffs on Lena. Fire crews stood by and paramedics checked Gareth for shock. As Colin was led away, Patricia Huang arrived at the door and offered a single nod. Justice, she murmured. He allowed himself a tight, weary smile. The next morning, Gareth read the paper over coffee. The front page told of the arrest of a real estate fraud ring. His name wasn't printed, but every detail was there. Sasha called. You did it. Diana at the DA's office sounded confident. The charges looked strong and Colin faced significant prison time. Lena's fate depended on cooperation. Testify and she might get probation. The fraudulent sale was voided and the house cleared of liens. Gareth would sort the insurance claim on the attempted arson, a bureaucratic formality. He walked his rooms and cataloged what was missing. His father's watches, his mother's jewelry, other valuables. But the house itself had been spared. He spent the day restoring order, replacing what he could and putting things back where they belonged. The work felt like healing. That evening he drove the familiar route to the courthouse garage, arriving early though his shift began Monday. He wanted to stand where it all began and remember who he'd been. The garage hummed under fluorescent lights as it always had, and he wandered to the empty slot where Colin's Bentley had once blocked the exit. Excuse me, a poised voice asked near the elevator. Gareth turned to find a woman in an expensive suit holding keys. Can I help you? He asked, folding his arms. She smiled politely. Are you the manager? He nodded. She leaned in, voice low and discreet. I'm looking for someone who can help me with a problem. Gareth raised an eyebrow. What kind of problem? She produced a sleek business card, hands it out with calm confidence. She was a little older than Lena, maybe in her mid-40s, and carried the quiet assurance of influence. Across the garage, a black Mercedes with dealer tags waited in the visitor spot. I'm sorry, he said, tucking the card away without taking it. I manage parking spaces, not problems. Unflinching, she slid the card back into her jacket. If you change your mind, call me. I pay well for results. She left, and Gareth glanced at the card. Victoria Ashford, private consulting, then tore it in half and dropped it in the trash. Some problems, he decided, weren't worth solving. 2 months later, Colin DRI received a 12-year federal sentence. Lena was given 5 years probation in exchange for testifying. The house's fraudulent claims were cleared, and Gareth kept his job at the garage. He found comfort in the routine and in making sure people reached their destinations. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday in April. Lena did not contest it and moved back in with her parents, taking a job at a call center and attempting to rebuild. He never saw her again. The house felt different, cleaner, more truly his, and he replaced the locks and installed a robust security system. Mrs. Patterson, his tenant, brought him a casserole the day the divorce became final and told him he'd done the right thing. Some people needed to learn that actions have consequences. I just wanted my house back, he told her. You got more than that. You got your life back. That evening, Gareth sat on the front porch watching the sunset smear orange and pink across the sky. The street hummed with quiet life as kids rode bikes and a dog barked in the distance. His phone buzzed. Darian texted, drinks tonight? My treat. He smiled and answered, sure. But I'm driving. Of course you are. You're the most careful man I know. He typed back, I'm learning. Learning what? Darian asked. That careful and smart aren't the same, he replied to himself as he stood and went back inside. He closed the door and the click of the lock was, to him, the most satisfying sound he'd heard in years.